Sony Computer Entertainment America presents a Universal Interactive Studios production. Developed by Eurocom Entertainment Software. Crash Bash!
Crash Bash is a party game developed by Mark Cerny and Michael John in the year 2000 for the PlayStation 1. If these guys did something right, it was this amazingly hype intro. Every time I see this intro, I just want to play some Bash. This was the first Crash Bandicoot game not to be developed by Naughty Dog, and the last Crash game released for the PS1. So the PS1 went out with a bang, and brought us this beautiful gem of a game that was definitely meant to be played with friends, but also featured a full-length story mode. Uka Uka and Aku Aku want to settle their differences, but cannot fight directly due to the laws of the ancients forbidding it. Thus, they decide to summon the forces of good and evil to wage battle for them in a series of different minigames. The forces of good summoned are Crash and Coco, while evil has Tiny, Dingodile, Brio, Cortex, Kong, and Rillaroot. Notably, Rillaroot is not featured in any other Crash game. The forces of evil are too great, leading formerly evil characters Tiny and Dingodile to play for the good team, to balance things out. In Crash Bash, there are 4 warps that are part of the story mode, and a 5th warp that is extra content. To proceed from one warp to the next, you need to collect enough trophies, gems, and crystals to fight the boss that is located in each warp room. In Warp 1, there are 4 minigames: Crash Ball, Polar Panic, Pogo Painter, and Jungle Bash. These 4 different games are minigames that will be repeated throughout each warp with new gimmicks and differences. So I will describe the minigame types and how they function. Crash Ball is a ballistic stage that is similar to Pong, but with 4 players. The player who manages to prevent the most balls from going into their goal wins. These ballistics levels can become extremely intense as more gimmicks and balls are added. Polar Panic is a polar push or panic level, where each player is riding a polar bear and must be the last one standing on the stage to win. This battle royale game is one of the most difficult to master and most frustrating. Pogo Painter is a pogo level that involves trying to turn tiles on the ground your color, and then cashing in or scoring those colored tiles by jumping on a crate, or in the case of Pogo Go-Go in Warp 2, by creating a square. Pogo levels are admittedly slow-paced due to being a timed level where the player must have the most points at the end of 1 minute and 30 seconds. Jungle Bash is a crate crush or bash level that is also a battle royale mode where the last player that still has health at the end wins. You defeat the other players by hitting them with stone crates, TNTs, or nitros. In later warps, other power-ups and gimmicks are added as well. To get past Warp 1, you need 4 trophies from each of the before-mentioned minigames to face Papu Papu. To win the trophy for each minigame, you must win a first 3 wins of that minigame. Once you have defeated him, you will be given access to Warp 2, where you will play another Ballistics, Polar Push, Pogo, and Crate Crush level, with 1 new minigame type added. Desert Fox is a Tanks War level, or Fox level, where the players ride in a small tank and must be the last one surviving at the end of the round to win. This style of minigame has a lot of strategy and some luck involved, but proves very difficult as more gimmicks are added. Baronator is the Warp 2 boss, and he requires 9 trophies, 6 gems, and 3 crystals to face. We haven't talked much about gems and crystals yet, but each level has a gem and crystal associated with it, as well as the trophy. Gems and crystals both have gimmicks that change the game being played slightly. For gems, the gimmick is usually time-based in the Battle Royale style modes. In the Pogo levels, you need to score a certain number of points before the AI do, but you start off needing more points than the AI. In the Ballistics levels, you will have fewer life points than your opponents when you start. For crystals, the gimmick is usually some unique change to the level that vastly changes how the player must play the game, and is different for each level type and each variation of that level type. The biggest difference between the trophy versus the gems and crystals is that the player only needs to win once on the gems and crystals in order to win the item, rather than 3 times in the trophy. The largest difference between the trophies in this game and the gems and crystals is that the AI also receive huge weight increases in the polar levels and health increases in the tank and bash levels. Especially in the later warps, it really starts to seem like the devs were feeling especially cruel towards the player. Once the Bearminator is defeated, you are able to move on to Warp 3, where the difficulty of each level type is noticeably ramped up from the prior warps. New variations on all previously mentioned level types are present once again with another new level type. Dot Dash is a crash dash, or just dash level, where each player is in a small go-kart type vehicle and they need to race around a track 10 times to win. The dash levels have Wumpa that the player can collect to give themselves a boost of speed, and other power-ups that knock the other racers off the track, such as missiles. In order to play against the Warp 3 boss Komodo Joe and Mo, you need to acquire 15 trophies, 10 gems, and 7 crystals. For every warp thus far, you need at least have acquired the trophy from every single level, as well as 2/3 of the gems, and slightly less than half of the crystals. After defeating the Komodo Bros, you are finally able to move on to the final warp, whose final boss is Nitrous Oxide. The players need all 22 trophies from each level, as well as 15 gems and 12 crystals. Once again, there is one new level type added in this warp. Ringding, also known as the Dumb Balloon Game, is actually a medieval level where the player must pop the most balloons before the timer runs out by jumping into the balloon of their color. The other medieval style games are all very different from this and are located in Warp 5, which we won't be discussing in this video. After acquiring the necessary trophies, gems, and crystals, the player is rewarded with the most difficult and unfair boss fight in the game. You versus Oxide in a one-on-one ballistics game where he shoots rockets at you and occasionally an instant kill red ball spawns, and it can only instantly kill you, not Oxide. You must score 8 normal balls in Oxide's goal before he scores 16 balls in yours, which seems doable at first until you realize that Oxide is basically impossible to score against. One thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is that bosses become easier to defeat the more the player fails against them. Thus, Oxide is much easier after about 4 fails or more. Once you defeat Oxide, the credits roll and the any percent run is over. One nice aspect of the speedrun for this game is that the player can pick and choose the gems and crystals they want to collect prior to facing Oxide. At the beginner level, you can choose pretty much any combination of gems and crystals in order to reach the end of the game. However, as you get better, there are recommended gems and crystals a player should go for because of how quickly they can be obtained. For example, it might be easier to get the Crash Ball gem because it is in the first warp and quite easy, but it is very slow, taking about 2 minutes to acquire. Instead, it is faster to try and obtain either Ringding Gem or El Pelgo Loco Gem, but both can be risky due to higher chance of failing. At the highest level, Manic Panic and Dream Bash gems are attempted in order to potentially save the most time. But they are the riskiest gems to go for, as a much higher RNG and difficulty factor is at play in these gems. Beginner, intermediate, and expert Crash Bash routes will be discussed in future videos. Another important aspect of Crash Bash speedrunning is the character you choose to play throughout the game. Speedrunners have decided that Tiny and Kong, the Burly Boys, are the 2 best characters in the game, due to having the greatest balance of strengths and weaknesses in every game type. Tiny and Kong have the second farthest throw in the Crate Crush games, the farthest and second hardest push in the Polar Push games, and the most damaging shot in the Fox games. Most other characters such as Brio, Cortex, Crash, and Coco are also very good characters in their own right, but are lacking in a major way in at least one of these 3 minigame types. Crash and Coco have the slowest moving tank shot in the Tank Wars games that also deals low damage, but are decent at both the Polar Push and Crate Crush games when used correctly. Brio and Cortex both are very good at the Crate Crush games, and decent at the Tank Wars games, but both are terrible at the Polar Push games. Even though they have the strongest pushes, it uses all of the stamina bar and leaves them extremely vulnerable until their bar recharges. Dingodile and Rillaroo both are terrible at the Polar Push games, slow and easy to hit in the Crate Crush games, as well as having weak bullets in the Tank Wars games. It is safe to say these 2 characters are the worst of the bunch and not ideal candidates for speedrunning. I myself picked Tiny as my character because very recently it has been discovered that Tiny has better frame data than Kong, so he is better in the pull or push and crate games by a slight amount. Also, Tiny gets to play against Brio or Cortex rather than Crash or Coco, which Kong has to play against. This shouldn't deter you from trying out other characters, as you may enjoy playing Coco, and can still certainly achieve amazing times. You may need to work harder to achieve those times, but it is still certainly possible. Don't be deterred if your first run is 3+ hours or more, as this is normal for all beginner runners who still need to learn the mechanics of the game. My first run ever took 3 hours and 18 minutes. If you keep at it, you will learn to master all different types of minigames until it feels less like the RNG is ruining your runs and rather it is your decision making that is preventing you from getting faster times. Another important aspect of Crash Bash speedrunning is the console you decide to play on. The cheapest method would be through PS2 emulation. Not all emulators are allowed for Crash Bash speedrunning due to differences from normal hardware, but all information on emulators for Crash Bash is locatable in the crashbashspeedrun.com guide section. The other way to play is by buying a PS2. If you decide to go this route, the best options for PS2 to buy are the 75K, the 79K, or the 90K, which are all slims. All of these PlayStations are considered optimal hardware and have no lag in levels as well as fast loading times when you turn on the fast disk speed. In any percent, it is approximately 5+ minutes or more, depending on your emulator, slower to use emulator over the PlayStation 2 models mentioned earlier. This should not deter you from trying to learn the game on emulator, as you can still achieve a great time. However, if you want to reach the top level in this game, you will need to purchase optimal hardware. Before I end this video, I would like to get up on my soapbox and talk about how this game is very different from most speed games. Knowing the route is far less important than good decision making and mastery of the mechanics. Being able to react to bad luck and deal with any situation is a staple of any high-level Crash Bash speedrunner. The true goal of Crash Bash speedrunning is not to go fast as possible, but rather to lose the least amount of time as possible. Bad luck will inevitably rear its head in many levels as you play, and the goal should be to minimize time loss with proper decision making as well as execution. Speedruns of this game are often very unique and different because of all the bad luck as well as routes, and this can be refreshing even for veteran players. I myself have been speedrunning the game for 5 months now, and often find myself laughing at ridiculous AI shenanigans that either screw me over or help me win faster. Even if you think there was nothing more you could have done in a certain situation, there likely was something different that could have been done in order to avoid a bad situation. Knowing this, the RNG doesn't sting quite as badly as it could because most situations, no matter how unlucky, are well within your ability to influence. I hope you all enjoyed this overview of Crash Bash any percent speedruns, and let me know in the comments if you want more help learning how to start running the game. I will offer the best tips I can. Please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, as I will be covering minigame and level strategies to help all Crash Bash speedrunners improve, whether you have just started or been playing for a very long time. This was LogicPQ, and thanks for watching.